Stock markets go up and down as business cycles change. Learn how to invest through different economic conditions. Then you might have chosen an executor for your estate, but are they prepared and willing to take on the job? And maybe it's time to draw money from your home. Is a reverse mortgage right for you? All this and more today on The Wealthy Life. Welcome to The Wealthy Life. Learn what you need to consider about economic and business cycles as you look at your investments. With us today is an investment strategist, Neil Linsdell, to show us what to do in different market cycles to ensure long-term investment growth of your portfolio. Neil, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, everybody wants to make a lot of money, but it's easier said than done to stay invested when news is good and bad all around you. It gets confusing. Yes. What should people know about different investment economic cycles?
Well, everybody should realize that economies, businesses, all operate on cycles. There's going to be times of growth, times when it levels out, and then times when we see declines, or as we talk about in economy, when you go into a recession.
Kind of like personal mood swings?
Personal mood swings, that's a great analogy here. Well, I mean, one of the things you can think about is when you, as a consumer, you go out and you start to look at buying big ticket items, right?
Yeah, I want to buy a new car, I want to buy a boat.
You want to buy a car, you want to buy a boat, you want to buy a mattress, you want to buy a new refrigerator. Usually what you do is you do that when everything is looking good, when you've got some good income from your job, maybe you've just had a bonus, maybe you've had an inheritance. When you're flush with cash, you tend to spend more.
Yes.
Businesses do the same thing, and it happens all through the economy. When the economy's been growing, people are out spending more money, but it can't last forever. You do get periods when that spending starts to drop off, and that's typically when we look at the economy slowing down, and then we go into a recession, and then we start the cycle again.
And that's the important thing to remember, is we go through the cycle again. People forget it every single time. Doomsday, recession, things pull back. They think this time it's different. How many times have we heard this time it's different? And yet the cycle continues and it does pick up again.
Yeah. I think one of the difficulties of that is when you think of a cycle, you think about something in a regular pattern. But cycles change. Sometimes you could have an 8-month cycle. Sometimes you could have an 8-year cycle. So you never really know when these things are going to start changing. So you have to really, in investment terms, you have to really plan for the long term, and you have to be able to ride out the noise and differentiate the noise and the static from your long-term goals.
What are some tips you have for investors to help them ride through for the long term?
Well, one of the things you can do is you can do rebalancing of your portfolio. There's usually an optimal mix that you get, and that's usually determined with your professional financial advisor. And it might be simplistically 60% stocks and 40% bonds.
Okay, that's your asset mix, say, for this example.
That's a hypothetical asset mix.
Yeah.
If you get into an environment where we've had several good years of stock market performance, and you might have that 60% is now 80 or 85%, you might want to think about rebalancing that back to your original risk matrix, which is your 60% and your 40%.
Well, that is a good trick to help stay disciplined to do the right thing. Yeah. We know to make money, you buy low and sell high. Human nature does the opposite typically. But when your stocks are up, you sell them when they're high to buy the fixed income. It rebalances, smooths out the volatility.
Yeah, and it keeps you around your risk profile.
Right.
So it's really all about being able to sleep at night with a good portfolio that's going to pay off for you in the long term.
What are the average types of returns that investors get investing in stock markets over the long run? I know it's a big range, but...
Over the long run, what you usually look at is where you are versus a risk-free rate, which is really what people talk about, what you can get through government securities.
Right.
And the risk premium is what you get for taking the added risk of the stock market. That's typically around 7% a year. So
the difference is about 7?
the risk premium for investing in the stock market is about 7% over that risk-free rate that we call it.
Okay, so in low interest rate environments, if the risk-free rate is 2%, then maybe stocks may average 9 over time. If risk-free rate is 6%, then maybe we're up to 13%. That might be on the high side, but somewhere in that range. So you get paid to ride through those ups and downs if you can ride through them.
And this is over time.
Yes.
So you have to remember there's going to be ups and downs, but it is a cycle, and it always comes back to that beginning of the cycle where we get the growth. And one of the things that I find a lot of investors, they make the mistake of, is trying to time the market. They say, well, I know we're into a cycle. I know we're going to be into a difficult time. So I'm going to take my money out of the market. And when things start to look better, I'll go back into the market. That can be a mistake.
I don't think that ever works unless you're fluke lucky.
The difficulty is most of the returns during that cycle are made during that early period. And that's when you're coming off that really negative attitude that people have about stocks. So you never know when that's going to turn and pick up. So if you try to time it, you're probably going to miss the beginning, and you're going to miss the best returns that you could get. So the best thing to do is really ride it out. Stick to your long-term plan.
So stay invested, diversify your portfolio, have an asset mix that's suitable for your risk profile.
Exactly.
And think long-term.
Exactly.
Neil, thanks for being with us today. Very informative.
Pleasure. Great to be here.
Up next, how to choose an executor and ensure they're up for the task when we return. You're ready to draft your will or have it updated and have appointed your kids as the executors. Is that the right choice? Joining us today is Senior Trust Advisor Marissa Ladinia to discuss the role of the executor and why it's important to choose wisely. Marissa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Sybil.
So let's first talk about what the role of the executor is as part of, or actually, let's backtrack. Let's first talk about how to settle an estate. What is involved?
Oh, there's a lot of work. So I think there's this whole misconception of thinking it's an honor to be appointed, when in fact it is basically a part-time job in addition to everything else that someone is taking care of in their daily life. So you're taking care of probate for the estate, you're valuating assets, you're consolidating accounts, you're closing accounts, you're canceling pensions and filing applications for insurance benefits, also filing taxes. And also, of course, the biggest one is, well, I have lists and lists that go on for pages long, but also communicating with beneficiaries who often want their money quickly and do not really understand what's involved behind the scenes to get it to them at the end of the day.
And not to mention, who's going to clean the fridge? And what if there's pets involved? All of
Pets
that.
definitely take I've seen many things that no one could imagine, but yes, a lot of things to consider today, absolutely.
So why do people think it's an honor to be appointed an executor, knowing all of that?
You know, I think sometimes people think in a family that it goes, sometimes to a spouse first and then the children. But in fact, you have to really pay attention to, the family dynamic and the relationship between your children. And even when things are good, sometimes, unfortunately, if you're not there to be the peacemaker at the end of the day, things could go wrong, even in the best of families. That's the truth. Sometimes you appoint one child and then they're resentful, having to do all the work, maybe not receiving anything more than the rest of them, with the other siblings just being impatient as to why they're not receiving everything quickly. And if you appoint more than one together, well, sometimes that can lead to butting heads as to how they would, handle the administration of a state. Or maybe one wants to take some shortcuts, but you have to remember there's personal liability involved when settling an estate if you distribute too soon.
So if you've got 6 children and appoint all 6 of your children as co-executors, I assume that would be a bit of a nightmare.
Absolutely. And I think something very important to consider today, as Canadians, we often have relatives who have moved over their lifetime south of the border. It's very important to remember that you want your estate to remain a Canadian estate for tax purposes and other estate settlement purposes. So very important to try to put the best people in place that can be able to handle it geographically, having the correct expertise, knowing their relationships, knowing their limitations, where they are in their life. Are they retired and maybe have more time, or younger and a little bit maybe busy to be able to handle it, but nobody wants to say no because they feel bad saying no about it.
Right. You feel like you're doing a favor and don't worry, I'll take care of everything. Now, is there compensation that comes along with this role? How do they get paid?
Absolutely. So a will itself can provide for the remuneration. It can be on an hourly basis or can provide for a percentage. And if the will is silent, then you can go apply to the courts and apply for, it's up to 5% depending on the province. And so that's why some people think at the end of the day, if I'm paying, I want to make sure it's done right. So very often people turn to professionals, notaries, lawyers, accountants to help them take care of settling the estate.
Now, how about for the person who was appointed an executor and all of a sudden that day comes and they need to do the work and they don't want to? Can they get help?
Absolutely. So very often, if they don't want to take it on at all, often there's a replacement provision in the will itself. So there's the mechanics, as to how to do that, whether it has to be by court appointment, by a written appointment, that depends. But if not, most professionals provide like an agency service to be able to engage professionals behind the scenes. I always say to quarterback the work from A to Z, yet still having them named officially to fulfill that honor that they've been so lucky to be receiving during their lifetime to help. But you can have people help you settle.
Oh, that takes a load off. That's great. Now, how about for the person who doesn't know who to appoint? They maybe have no children, they're getting older, no one else to appoint. Who should they consider?
That's a great point. Sometimes they think about friends, but to be honest, their friends are usually around the same age as them, so not always the best choice. And that's why more and more Canadians, I would say, are turning to professionals, knowing that there's always that continuity there. Even if you meet a professional that's around the same age as you, they often work with a larger team that will help to be able to continue to support behind the scenes for whenever that time comes, right? We say death and taxes are inevitable, so someone will be there to help support if you work with professionals.
And what should people have prepared in advance to make it easier for the executor?
First and foremost, an up-to-date will makes everything better going forward, and your family will thank you and your executor later on. But I would say have a power of attorney, will, and your title documents, account documentation all in one place, whether that be virtual or in a physical cabinet somewhere, so that your executor will be able to locate everything when the time comes.
And we have an estate planning workbook to make it easy for our viewers. Marissa, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
And up next, house rich and cash poor? Maybe a reverse mortgage is right for you. House rich but cash poor? Maybe it's time to tap into the equity of your home. Joining us now is Vivian Gauchi from Home Equity Bank to discuss how a reverse mortgage works. Vivian, welcome to The Wealthy Life.
Thank you for having me here, Sybil.
So what is a reverse mortgage?
Well, a reverse mortgage is very simply a loan secured against the value of your home. And one of the beautiful things about it is that you don't have to make monthly mortgage payments. So the real difference between a reverse mortgage and a conventional mortgage is that you don't have to make these monthly mortgage payments. So for a lot of people, they provide a cash flow and ease in having to make these monthly mortgage payments.
Well, geez, I think everybody would love to have a mortgage where they didn't have to make monthly mortgage payments.
Right?
Yeah, but there's got to be a catch. Is this eligible at any age, for example? Young people buying a home?
Well, unfortunately, Sybil, this product is very exclusive only to Canadian homeowners age 55 plus. But it's interesting that you're talking about younger borrowers who are looking to get into the home market, for example, because one thing that we've been seeing lately is that parents are coming to us because they want to give their kids a leg up and help them get into the home market.
Because it's expensive nowadays.
It's so expensive right now. Getting the down payment with home prices being where they're at, and also with interest rates being higher, it's hard for a first-time home buyer to get into the market. So what people do is, for Canadian 55 plus with a home and you have equity in the home, you come to us and we help you take out some money from the home and be able to provide it to your kids, so that instead of them having to wait until you pass away, you can actually help them now when they need it most.
Oh, and you can watch them enjoy it.
Yes.
What's the maximum amount of the equity in your home you can pull out as a reverse mortgage?
Well, usually the maximum amount is up to 55%, but that will always vary. It really depends on your age, where your home is located, what type of home it is, and the value of your home. I will say, though, that we're Canadian and we tend to be conservative, and most people don't take the full amount that they're eligible for. They tend to take a small amount. Actually, our average mortgage amount is about $200,000. And what they do is they take whatever amount that they need right now, and they save the rest potentially for a rainy day.
Well, I think Canadians hopefully don't want debt. I mean, we are raised as children, don't have debt, don't have debt. House debt is good debt. But when you get to a certain age, if you have no debt, but you don't have the cash flow to do what you want to do, then what's the point? So this is a great way to tap in and access the equity in your home for other things. What are some other reasons people would want to make use of a reverse mortgage?
Well, it's interesting. The number one reason is actually people are paying off existing debt. So they might still have a mortgage on their home, and not having to make those monthly mortgage payments alleviates a lot of that pressure of having to make these monthly mortgage payments.
It just frees up the cash flow.
There you go.
So if they're making a $1,000 a month payment towards a mortgage, flip that to a reverse mortgage, no payments.
And now you've found $1,000 that you didn't have before a month, right?
Yes.
So there's that. There is home renovations. So people want to fix up the place, or people might want to retrofit the home and make it a little bit easier for them as they age.
Right.
So that's another very popular use. And some of the use cases that we've been seeing more recently have been tied to home health care costs. So people want to stay in their homes. They don't want to go into long-term care facilities for, endless reasons. But they actually need to have some kind of home health care support. So they come to us, they get some funds, and they get it on a monthly basis as well. They don't have, again, we talked about not having to take all the money up front.
Okay, so you do have a choice of getting a lump sum or just having it create an income stream for a period of time.
Correct, absolutely. It's a huge benefit. And so what people do is they take that money and then they have somebody come to the house maybe once, twice, 3 times a week, or whatever it is that they need to help them with whatever it is that they might need to be able to age in the comfort of their own home.
Now, what's the impact to the estate of doing a reverse mortgage?
Well, as I mentioned, so a lot of people will take a very small amount. We're Canadian, we're conservative, we don't take all that we qualify for, generally speaking. But what ends up happening is the interest does accrue on the amount that you've borrowed, obviously. But it's a loan. no escaping
money
that.
Plus interest. So
no escaping that.
Yep.
But what happens is, real estate, long-term over time, it tends to appreciate. And so the appreciation rate, let's call it a conservative 3% per year, that happens on the entire value of the home. So what ends up happening is your home is appreciating at a certain amount, and yes, your mortgage is also accruing interest at a certain amount, but by the end of the mortgage, you tend to end up having about the same amount of equity percentage-wise as you did going in.
Any final comments for our viewers today?
Well, I have a copy of our book here today, and your viewers are welcome to call the number on the screen and get their own free copy. It has all the questions that they might want answered about reverse mortgages in here.
Vivian, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Sybil.
And don't go away. Learn how to pay off your debt faster when we return. Welcome back. Thanks for your emails and social media messages. We love hearing from you. Today's question is from Antonio. Dear Sybil, I currently have a mortgage and money owed on my line of credit and 2 credit cards. I want to pay off my debt faster. What do you suggest? Much appreciated, Antonio. Well, Antonio, there's good debt and there's bad debt, and it sounds like you have a little bit of both. The mortgage is good debt because a house is an appreciating asset. But credit card debt is typically very expensive and not something that is going to help create wealth for you over the long run. So I love the fact that you're trying to pay it off sooner. Couple of tips to consider. One is have a look at what is the interest rate on each of your different debts outstanding. Assuming the credit card debt is the highest rate, consider applying for a different credit card that maybe has an introductory low interest rate offer. They'll let you transfer your balances from your existing credit cards over so that you can pay little or no interest for a set period of time. That will free up some cash flow so you can put that savings right down on the amount you owe. The other thing is to inquire with your bank on your line of credit. Maybe they will use your house as collateral so that the line of credit interest rate you're being charged is lower than you might be paying right now. When you consolidate all your debt together, if it's at a lower rate, which the bank might be able to help you with, that means that you can pay it off faster. Couple other tips. Think of using your bonuses from work, if you get bonuses, to throw it right down on your debt. Maybe double up your payments. Maybe shorten your amortization period on your mortgage. When you do all of those things together, you can get things paid off in no time at all. And that wraps up this edition of The Wealthy Life, helping you make smart financial decisions. Join the Wealthy Life Club and you'll get access to everything you need to live your version of a wealthy life.